She said it like she was reminding me of something I'd forgotten. Not angry, not emotional, not rushed. Just settled. Pack your things. You're done here. For a second I didn't move. Not because I was stunned, but because my brain was still catching up to how casually she'd said it, like it was a house rule. Like this moment had been rehearsed in her head long before she ever opened her mouth. She stood in the doorway of the guest room holding a black trash bag. Thick plastic. The kind you use for yard waste. The kind you don't worry about tearing. My clothes were folded on the bed behind me. I'd been organizing them slowly, methodically, the way you do when you're trying not to take up space in someone else's home. The way you behave when you know you're tolerated, not wanted. "I'm sorry," I said. She didn't repeat herself. She stepped forward instead, dropped the trash bag at my feet and crossed her arms. "This arrangement isn't working anymore," she said. "You need to go." Arrangement. I glanced past her, down the hallway toward the living room. My son was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling. He knew what was happening. He had known before she walked into that room. You could tell by the way he didn't look up, the way his shoulders were already braced. I waited. He didn't say anything. That silence was louder than her voice. She moved without asking, opening the dresser drawer and pulling out shirts I'd folded that morning. She didn't throw them violently. She didn't need to. She just dropped them into the bag one by one, like inventory. "You've been here long enough," she said. "And honestly, this house feels crowded." Crowded. I had moved in after my wife died. Temporarily. That was the word we'd used. Temporary. Just until I figured out my next step. Just until things settled. I'd helped them with the down payment on that house. Quietly. No paperwork. No string. I'd co-signed the loan when the bank hesitated. I'd covered utilities more than once when money was tight. I never brought it up. People like her count on that. "You're a guest," she added. "Remember that." That word landed harder than she probably intended. Guest. Not father. Not family. Guest. My son finally spoke. But not to defend me. "Dad," he said, still not looking up. "Maybe it's better if you find your own place for a bit." For a bit. That's how people phrase permanent decisions when they don't want to admit what they're doing. I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because I understood exactly what was happening. She tied the trash bag shut with a quick pull, the plastic stretching tight around years of my life. Then she nudged it toward me with her foot. "You can be out tonight," she said. "I'll need the room." I stood up slowly. I didn't argue. Didn't remind them of anything I'd done. Didn't ask how we'd gotten here. Because I've learned something over the years: when someone finally shows you who they are, interrupting them only delays the lesson. I picked up the bag. She watched me closely, waiting for something: anger, pleading, embarrassment. When none of that came, her expression tightened just slightly. Not enough for my son to notice. Enough for me to register. I walked past her, down the hallway, and stopped at the front door long enough to grab my coat. My son still hadn't looked up. I paused there for half a second, long enough to give him one last chance to say something. Anything. He didn't. So I opened the door and stepped outside. The door closed behind me with a soft click. No drama, no goodbye. Just silence. I stood on the porch for a moment, the trash bag at my feet, and breathed in the cold air like I was surfacing from underwater. The house behind me was quiet again, the way it always is after someone decides they've won. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. What I felt was clarity. Because in that moment, I understood something she didn't. I wasn't dependent. I was disconnected. And there's a difference. That night, I checked into a small rental on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and mine. I left the trash bag by the door and sat on the bed fully dressed for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I reached for my phone. I didn't call my son. I didn't call her. I called the bank. The account was joint, always had been, opened years earlier when they needed help and trusted me more than paperwork. I'd kept my name on it because it made things easier. Their words, not mine. The banker recognized my voice. I asked one simple question. What authority do I have on that account? She answered. I gave instructions. By midnight the account was frozen. No withdrawals. No transfers. No access. Then I made another call, and another. By morning, the credit cards declined. By sunrise, the car loan flagged. I turned my phone face down on the nightstand and went to sleep. At 6:03 a.m., it started ringing. The phone didn't stop ringing. It buzzed first. The soft vibration against the cheap nightstand, then rang loud enough to fill the room. I let it go. I wanted to hear it echo. I wanted the silence between calls to stretch just long enough for realization to begin setting in on the other end. When you remove someone's sense of control, the first thing they feel isn't fear. It's confusion. I finally picked up on the fifth call. "What did you do?" my son asked, his voice tight, already cracking. Not "good morning." Not "are you okay?" Not even "where are you?" Straight to the problem. "I left," I said calmly. "That's not what I mean," he snapped. "The cards aren't working. The account's frozen. She's freaking out." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headboard. Of course she was. "What did you expect would happen?" I asked. There was a pause. Not because he didn't understand, because he did, and didn't like where the understanding led. "You can't just do this," he said. "That money is ours." "Ours?" I repeated. "Yes," he said quickly. "We've been using it for years." "So have I replied. "That's why my name is on it." Another pause. Longer this time. In the background, I could hear her voice. Sharp, panicked, pacing. Drawers opening. Doors slamming. The sound of someone losing control of a situation they assumed was permanent. "Tell him to fix it." She snapped loudly enough for me to hear. I smiled for the first time since leaving the house. "Put her on the phone," I said. "She doesn't want to talk to you." My son replied. "That's fine," I said. "I don't want to talk to her either." I hung up. Minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time with her number. I didn't answer. Letting it ring was important. Silence teaches lessons words never can. I made coffee, sat by the window, watched the city wake up while their world stalled. Traffic moved. People walked dogs. Somewhere, a barista handed someone a cup with their name written wrong. Life continued. At exactly 6:41 a.m., she left a voicemail. Her tone was different now. Not commanding, not dismissive. "Careful. Listen," she said, forcing a steadiness that didn't quite land. "There's been some kind of mistake. The bank says the account is frozen. We need access immediately. We have bills." Bills. She'd said, "This isn't your house," with no hesitation. Now she said, "We," like it was automatic. I deleted the message without responding. By mid-morning, the consequences started stacking. The grocery order didn't go through. The car payment flagged. One credit card declined at a gas station loudly. Humiliation always arrives faster than reflection. My son called again around 9. His voice sounded smaller now. "She's at the bank," he said. "They won't even talk to her." "They shouldn't," I replied. "Her name isn't on the account." That sentence landed hard. "What do you mean?" he asked. I took a slow breath. "Your name is on it. Mine is on it. Hers never was." Silent. She had assumed. She had always assumed. "I handled everything," he muttered. She said a lot of things," I cut in. "So did you." He didn't argue. Because for the first time, the math wasn't on his side. That afternoon, she finally showed up at my rental. I hadn't given her the address. That told me how desperate she'd already become. She knocked hard. Sharp. Angry. The knock of someone used to being answered. I didn't open the door right away. I wanted her to feel what it's like to wait outside something she thought belonged to her. When I did open it, she didn't bother with pleasantries. "You can't do this," she said, stepping forward like she intended to walk right past me. I blocked the doorway. "I already did," I replied. Her eyes darted around the room. Bare walls, unopened bag by the door. Nothing familiar to claim. "This is retaliation," she said. "You're being vindictive." I laughed quietly. "No," I said. "This is correction." Her face tightened. "You lived in my house." She shot back. "I invested in it," I said. "And I left when you asked." "That doesn't give you the right." "It gives me every right," I interrupted. "Because I never surrendered it." That was when the mask slipped. "You think you're clever," she said. "Freezing accounts. Embarrassing us. You think this makes you powerful?" I looked at her evenly. "No," I said. "You thought you were." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, because she realized something all at once. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't reacting. I was finished. "You told me to pack my things," I said quietly. "So I did. You told me I was a guest. So I left." I stepped back and gestured to the hallway behind me. "And now," I continued, "you're the one standing outside." Her voice dropped, sharp and bitter. "You're going to regret this." I met her gaze. "No," I said. "I'm going to remember it." I closed the door. That evening, my son sent a message. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer, because this wasn't about conversation. It was about impact. And the impact had only just begun. By the third day, the anger disappeared. That's always the tell. Anger is what people use when they think they still have leverage. When anger fades, it's because they've finally understood they're no longer in control, and they're searching for another way in. That's when the messages started changing. Not demands, not threats. Stories. My son called first. Not early. Not late. Right in the middle of the afternoon, when people usually feel steady enough to pretend things are normal. "Dad," he said, softer now. "Careful, I think we got off on the wrong foot." Wrong foot. Like this had been a misunderstanding between equals. "I don't think so," I replied. He exhaled slowly. I could hear him pacing. I could hear the strain of someone trying to say the right thing without admitting the wrong one. "She didn't mean it the way it came out," he said. "You know how she is when she's stressed." I said nothing. Silence is dangerous when someone is trying to rewrite reality. "She feels bad," he continued. "She just wants to talk." "About what?" I asked. He hesitated. "About everything." Everything. That word people use when they don't want to list specifics. "I packed my things," I said calmly, "just like she told me to." That's exactly what she told me," I interrupted. "If you're calling to negotiate whether I deserved it, don't." He went quiet. Behind his silence, I could hear her not shouting anymore but coaching. Low voice. Controlled. Feeding him lines. "She says you're being extreme," he said finally. I laughed. Not loudly. Just enough for him to hear it. "She threw my clothes in a trash bag," I said. "What part of that felt moderate to you?" He didn't answer. Because there was no safe answer. That night, she emailed me. Not from her personal account. From a shared family address. Another calculated move. A way to make it feel communal, reasonable, non-threatening. The subject line read, "Let's reset." I didn't open it right away. I waited until the next morning, when emotions tend to settle and people reveal what they actually mean. The message was long. Too long. It started with apologies that weren't apologies. "I'm sorry you felt disrespected. That wasn't my intention. We were under a lot of pressure." Then came the reframing. "This house has been stressful. Boundaries weren't clear. We all made mistakes. All, equal blame. Equal fault." Then came the proposal. If you reinstate access to the accounts, we can talk about you coming back temporarily. We don't want things to be ugly. Ugly. I reread that sentence 3 times, because in her mind, ugly didn't mean cruel or humiliating or wrong. Ugly meant inconvenient. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to my attorney. That afternoon, things escalated. My sister called. Then my cousin. Then an old family friend I hadn't spoken to in years, all with the same tone. Cautious. Rehearsed. Just concerned enough to feel sincere. She's having a hard time, my sister said. They didn't realize how much you were helping, my cousin added. Families shouldn't let money tear them apart, someone else offered. Money. That's what they called it when they didn't want to say respect. I listened. I thanked them. I said I understood. Then I hung up. Because what they didn't know, what she hadn't counted on, was that this wasn't about punishing her. It was about ending something. The next move came faster than I expected. Legal. A letter arrived by courier 2 days later. Heavy paper. Firm language. Carefully aggressive. They claimed I'd abused my position, that freezing the account constituted financial coercion, that they would pursue action if I didn't restore access immediately. I smiled when I read it. Because it told me exactly how unprepared they were. The account wasn't theirs. The credit wasn't hers. The loan wasn't permanent. Everything they were threatening depended on assumptions they had never verified. My attorney responded within hours. Clean, precise. Boring in the way that terrifies people who rely on emotion. By evening, their lawyer stopped calling. That night, my son came to the rental again. This time he didn't knock loudly. He stood there for a long time before I opened the door. He looked different, tired, small, like someone who'd spent 3 days learning that confidence borrowed from someone else disappears the moment that person loses control. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. I studied his face. You thought it would stop where it was comfortable for you, I replied. He swallowed. She says you're doing this to hurt her. No, I said. I'm doing this because she hurt me. And you allowed it. He looked down. I should have said something, he admitted. Yes. I agreed. You should have. That was all. No lecture. No shouting. Just the truth. Placed where he could finally see it. She wants to come talk, he said quietly. Face to face. I shook my head. No, I said. That time has passed. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I said slowly. She didn't ask me to leave. She told me to. And you let her. He closed his eyes. That doesn't get reset with conversation. He stood there for a long moment, absorbing that. Then what happens now, he asked. I stepped back and opened the door wider. Not inviting him in, just signaling the end of the exchange. Now, I said. You learn what happens when you confuse kindness with permission. He nodded once. Then he left. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. One message. From her. You think you've won. You haven't. I didn't reply. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about exposure, and the people who mistake control for strength never realize how fragile their position actually is, until everything holding it up disappears at once. The first meeting didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in a living room. That's usually where families try to fix things before they admit they can't. My sister hosted it. Neutral ground, she said. A place where everyone could talk calmly. She meant well. People always do when they think calm can undo something that was deliberate. I arrived early. I wanted to see who would show up and who wouldn't. My son came first. Alone. That was new. His posture told me everything before he said a word. He sat down slowly. Hands clasped, eyes darting toward the door like he was bracing for impact. She's on her way, he said. I nodded. I didn't say anything else. When she arrived, she didn't greet me. She didn't have to. She'd already decided what version of herself she was presenting today. She smiled. Not warmly. Politely. The smile of someone who believes witnesses will protect her. "I'm glad we're finally doing this," she said, taking a seat across from me. "This has gotten blown out of proportion." There it was. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I crossed a line." Blown out of proportion. My sister cleared her throat. My cousin shifted uncomfortably. Everyone looked at me, waiting to see if I'd react. I didn't. She took that as permission. "You were never asked to leave harshly," she continued. "We were just asking for space. You chose to escalate." Escalate. She said it carefully, like a legal term, like something she'd practiced saying in front of a mirror. I leaned back slightly and folded my hands. "You handed me a trash bag," I said calmly, "and told me to pack." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's not how it happened." My sister frowned. "It is," my son said quietly. Every head in the room turned toward him. It was the first time he'd contradicted her in public. She stared at him, eyes sharp. "Don't start," she said under her breath. I watched the room register that moment. People always notice control when it slips. "You told him he was a guest," my son added, voice shaking but steady enough to land. "You said the room wasn't his." Silence followed. Not awkward silence. Calculating silence. She laughed lightly, as if this were all absurd. "I was upset," she said. "People say things. Then why didn't you apologize?" my sister asked. That question hit harder than any accusation. She hesitated. Then she did something interesting. She turned to me. "If you felt disrespected," she said, "you could have talked to us instead of attacking us financially." There it was, the reframing. I didn't answer her. I looked at my sister instead. "She told me to leave." I said. "So I did." I turned back to her. "And then I removed access to what was never fully yours." Her smile faltered. "Just slightly. That money supported our household," she said. "You knew that." "Yes," I replied. "Which is why you should have thought twice before throwing me out of it." My cousin exhaled sharply. Someone muttered "Jesus" under their breath. She leaned forward now, irritation breaking through the polish. "You're punishing us," she said. "No," I corrected. "I'm correcting you." Her eyes hardened. "You're destroying your relationship with your son," she snapped. I turned to him. "That was never mine to destroy," I said. He didn't look up. That's when the meeting started to unravel. Voices overlapped. Opinions surfaced. People took sides quietly, some shifting away from her, some still clinging to the idea that this could be smoothed over if everyone just calmed down. She noticed. You could see it in the way she sat straighter, spoke louder, interrupted more. Control slipping makes people reckless. "Let's be clear," she said sharply. "You can't legally do what you're doing." I smiled. That was the moment she revealed how little she actually knew. "I can," I said. "And I already have." Her face flushed. "Then we'll take this further," she said. "We'll involve lawyers." "I already did," I replied. The room went quiet. My son looked up, then really looked at me. "You did?" he asked. "Yes." She stared at him, then back at me. "You're serious?" she said. "I've been serious since you handed me that bag." That was when she stood up. "This is ridiculous," she said. "I won't sit here and be humiliated." She grabbed her purse and turned to leave. But before she reached the door, my sister spoke. "You should apologize," she said. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. She froze. Apologize. To her, that word wasn't a gesture. It was surrender. She didn't turn around. "I have nothing to apologize for," she said coldly. "I was protecting my home." She walked out. The door closed behind her. No one followed. That's when the truth settled in the room. "She really believes that," my cousin said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "That's the problem. After that meeting, Things moved quickly. Formal notices were sent. Boundaries were documented. Accounts stayed frozen. Access stayed revoked. My son moved into a spare room at a friend's place that same week. He didn't tell her at first. When he did, she accused him of betrayal. I heard that from someone else. I didn't need to hear it from him. Because by then something else had happened. People had chosen. Family members who'd stayed neutral before started distancing themselves from her. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations grew shorter. The benefit of the doubt ran out. She tried to paint me as vindictive. But vindictive people shout. They rage. They demand. I did none of that. I simply stopped providing what she'd assumed was permanent. And once that happened, the mask didn't just slip. It shattered. By the end of the week, she sent one last message. You didn't have to make this public. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. You made it public the moment you told me I didn't belong. That was the last thing I said to her. And from that point on, she wasn't fighting me anymore. She was fighting reality. The shift didn't happen all at once. That's what surprises people the most when I tell them what came next. They expect a single moment where everything collapses. A call from a lawyer, a dramatic court date, a public blow-up. Instead, it happened the way real consequences usually do. Quietly, methodically, without asking anyone how they felt about it. The first thing to change was tone. Emails stopped sounding confident. Text stopped sounding certain. Every message that came from her after that meeting was shorter, more careful, stripped of the sharpness she used when we thought she was still in charge. My attorney handled most of it. That was intentional. I didn't want emotion anywhere near the process. Emotion is what people use when facts aren't on their side. And facts finally were. The joint account stayed frozen, not as punishment but as protection. Documentation was clean. Authority was clear. There was nothing dramatic about it, just signatures doing exactly what they were designed to do. Credit followed. The cards tied to that account didn't just decline. They were reviewed. Limits reassessed. Terms revised. The car loan, once flagged, was restructured. Nothing was taken suddenly. It was worse than that. It was removed slowly, with explanations attached. She called my son constantly during that period, at first to vent, then to panic, then to bargain. He told me later how the conversations changed. She keeps saying this wouldn't have happened if you'd just stayed quiet. He said one evening, sitting across from me in the rental's small kitchen. I looked at him. That's how people who benefit from silence think, I replied. He rubbed his face with both hands. She says you're trying to destroy her. No, I said calmly. I stopped protecting her. That distinction landed differently now. Because he was no longer shielded by her confidence. He was standing inside the consequences with her. Except unlike her, he hadn't chosen this fight. That's when the first official letter arrived. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Informational. It outlined the changes. The loss of access. The timeline. The next steps. No accusation, no emotion. Just reality on paper. She reacted the only way people do when systems don't respond to intimidation. She tried to find leverage. She told him she'd talk to my family. Then she told him she'd expose me. Then she told him she'd leave. He didn't stop her. That was new. When she left, really left, it wasn't dramatic either. No screaming. No bags thrown this time. Just silence. Followed by absence. She went to stay with someone who believed her version of events. At least at first. That support didn't last long. Because here's the thing about stories. They only hold up if they don't require everyone else to lie. Once she started explaining why she had no access to money. No credit, no authority, no house. People began asking questions. And questions are dangerous when you're relying on control. My son watched it happen in real time. She keeps changing her explanation. he said quietly one night. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's the bank, sometimes it's bad advice. And sometimes, I asked. He hesitated. And sometimes she says I failed her. That one hurt him more than the rest. Because it was the first time she'd turned the blade inward. That's when something finally broke in him. Not loyalty. Not love. Denial. He stopped trying to fix it. Stopped making calls. Stopped defending her to others. Stopped pretending this could be reversed. I don't recognize her anymore, he said. I met his eyes. You never did, I replied. You recognized the version of her that benefited you. He didn't argue. By then, legal realities had begun closing in. Not lawsuits. Not battles, boundaries. Formal separation of finances. Clear ownership documentation. Revised agreements. Everything she'd once spoken for gone. She tried one last move. She sent a message to me directly. Not angry, not pleading. Measured. If you release the funds, we can end this quietly. Quietly. The same words she'd used before. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney. That was the moment the door closed for good. My son found out later. She says you're heartless, he told me. I nodded. People confuse boundaries with cruelty when they're no longer inside them. He sat with that for a long time. I didn't think silence could do this much damage. He admitted. It always does, I said. It just takes time to show itself. By the end of that month, the damage was visible everywhere. She no longer had access to the house. She no longer controlled the narrative. She no longer had leverage. And my son? He was alone in a way he'd never been before. Not abandoned. Just unprotected. That's when he finally asked the question he'd avoided since the day she handed me that trash bag. What happens now? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about endings. It was about irreversibility. And some things, once undone, don't get rebuilt no matter how much regret follows. There's a point where nothing else needs to happen. No more messages. No more meetings. No more explanations. That's when you know it's over. It didn't end with a fight. It didn't end with an apology. It didn't end with forgiveness or reconciliation, or some dramatic turning point people like to imagine when families fall apart. It ended with paperwork and silence. The final notices arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. No courier, no phone call, just envelopes in the mail, addressed correctly, worded precisely, stamped and dated like thousands of others processed that day. The house was no longer jointly leveraged. The remaining accounts were separated. The liabilities were reassigned. What she once spoke about as our future was now just a list of terms she had no authority to revise. My attorney explained it calmly, as if we were discussing zoning laws or insurance riders. She no longer has standing, he said. Not financially, not legally, not personally. Standing. That word matters. Because standing is what people rely on when they say things like you can't do this or this isn't fair. Without it, those statements stop being arguments and start being noise. My son came by that evening, not unannounced, not demanding. He asked first. That alone told me something had changed. He sat across from me at the small table in the rental, the same one he'd sat at during Chapter 5, but this time he didn't look like someone waiting for instruction. He looked like someone who had finally accepted that no one was coming to fix things for him. She moved out completely, he said. I nodded. She's staying with a friend for now, he continued. At least, I think so. You don't need to update me on her living arrangements, I replied. He flinched slightly, then nodded again. I know, he said. I wanted you to hear it from me. I studied his face. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. Not yet. He wasn't asking for help either. He was reporting reality. That mattered. They finalized everything today, he said. The accounts. The house. All of it. Yes, I said. They did. He hesitated. then asked the question he'd been carrying since chapter. Was there ever a point, he said quietly, where I could have stopped this? I answered honestly. Yes. His shoulders tightened. When? He asked. When she handed you the confidence to speak for both of you, I said. And you didn't take it back. He stared at the table. I didn't think it was that serious, he whispered. It never does, I replied, until it is. Silence settled between us. Not hostile, not warm, just clear. After a moment he spoke again. I'm not asking to go back to how things were, he said. I know that's gone. I waited. I'm asking what's left, he finished. That was the most honest thing he'd said in months. I leaned back in my chair. What's left, I said slowly, is a relationship without assumptions. He looked up. No access, I continued. No automatic trust. No expectation that blood overrides behavior. He nodded. I understand, he said. I believed him. But belief isn't restoration. You're my son, I said. That doesn't change. But proximity, privilege, and protection, those are earned. He swallowed. Can I earn them back? Some, I said. Not all. He accepted that. That's how I knew this conversation was different. A week later, she tried once more. Not through him. Not through family. Directly. One message. I never thought you'd go this far. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not because it hurt. Because it no longer mattered. The final consequence wasn't financial. It wasn't legal. It wasn't even relational. It was access. She lost access to my home, to my resources, to my decision-making, to my silence. And that's the one thing people like her never plan for. The moment when the person they dismissed stops participating altogether. Months passed. Life stabilized. I moved into a smaller place closer to where I wanted to be. I rebuilt routines that didn't require permission. I slept without waiting for the sound of someone else deciding what came next. My son and I spoke occasionally. Carefully, honestly, without pretending the past hadn't happened. We didn't rebuild what was broken. We built something narrower, stronger, and quiet. People sometimes ask me if I regret freezing the accounts. I don't. Because that wasn't the act that ended everything. It was the response that clarified it. She told me to pack my things. She told me I was a guest. She told me I was done. So I listened. And then I reminded her what ownership actually looks like. Not shouting. Not threats. Not revenge. Just the quiet authority to close doors and keep them closed.